doctoral student and is an amazing online technician with the software domain. And so he's doing a great work for us. Well, welcome everybody. It's great having everybody here. My name is Jon Kay. I'm the director of Traditional Arts Indiana, which is a statewide folk arts program which is recognized by the state of Indiana and is a partnership between the Indiana Arts Commission and Indiana University's Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology. Because my eyesight's bad, I'm going to trust that Chad will chime in when someone blogs or chats something that I need to be made aware of, but I'll be trying to watch the chat line as well. Anyway, this is the first webinar we've done in a while, the first one of the 2012. And first of all, I should say why we're going to be doing these webinars. We are doing them as a way of reaching people both spatially and temporally, you might say. We're able to serve the entire state, hopefully, by providing these. And then these will be housed online where folks can go to their local library, or if they're lucky enough to have the internet at home, they can download it and watch it there as well. So that's the reason that we're doing these webinars. So I should thank all the funders for Traditional Arts Indiana, as I said, the Indiana Arts Commission, Indiana University, and we also receive funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. So very thankful to them for their ongoing support of us. Well, what our work is going to be today is I'm going to be talking about the Performer's Toolkit. And this is a workshop that I've done off and on for several years. And I've divided this up into two sections. First section is just going to be generally talking about some ideas about performing, hopefully have some nuggets in there that musicians will be able to make use of. Whether you're a musician, an art supporter who works with traditional musicians, whether you're a folk, traditional, ethnic, punk band, whatever your domain is, it's fine. I think everything I've got to say here is going to be fairly universal. But we'll just take it for face value. Then I'm going to enter in the second part talking about have you lost me? That just the PowerPoint was lost here. I'm sorry. We do have some people, I should say, here in the room. We have Josephine McRobbie and Betsy Shepard here, physically present, in addition to our virtual pals out there. The second part we'll talk about interpretation, but I've talked too long, so I want to go ahead and go on to our next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about what it is we're going to be talking about. Well, if you are a musician or artist, there are three things that you need to have to be a professional performing artist. Hopefully artistic ability. Nothing I can do about that if you don't have it. You just probably better hope that you've got that. That's the cost of admission. Most people just want to do their art, but once we try to take that art and take it out and make it into a business, we have to develop some other skills in addition to being able to play the banjo or to tell a story or whatever our artistic ability is. So you need to be able to couple that with not just being an artist, but also having some basic understanding of business and also a good set of performance skills. And I would say that while I can't do much about your artistic ability, I think we can talk about basic understanding of business and basic performing skills and really improve those things with some conscious effort. Should say from the beginning, this idea of a toolbox or a toolkit I think is an apt one, because tools are used for a variety of things. You can use them to build something, repair something, maintain something, and so I've tried to make this workshop structured in such a way that whether you're at the beginning trying to figure out how you can go out into the world and do performances outside the normal context that maybe you normally play your music in, or maybe you've been doing it for a long time and you need to back up and rethink it, kind of repair some things that used to work but now just the audience doesn't find it funny anymore. They don't come out like they used to. Or maybe things are going great. I think some of the stuff we'll be talking about are just good to maintain. And I'm reminded of, I don't usually like to quote business book people, but Stephen Covey in his book First Things First stressed the idea of sharpening the saw, kind of carrying our tool metaphor forward. So no matter where you are, continue to develop your skills. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about working with presenters. I should say a little bit more about who I am. For several years, I was a professional musician, performing both locally and nationally, regionally. Everything from local coffee shops, did the whole coffee house circuit, did several festivals. Finally got to the point where I was just stepping on an airplane, fly to a place and do a show, and then fly back, and then finally decided that I didn't have time to do that because I was having so much fun doing other things too. So I'm not really playing out anymore, but after I stopped being a full-time musician, I did become a folklorist, studying at Western Kentucky University, and then I became a festival director, directed the Florida Folk Festival, and now I work at Indiana University directing Traditional Arts Indiana. So I've been an artist, I've been a presenter, and I'm now folk arts programmer, you might say. So working with presenters, if you're an artist, I think the first thing you have to do is understand the artist-presenter audience paradigm. Overlapping spheres where people come together and try to share their time together. And it's important to think about working the model, these three things together. Now I want to say when I'm talking about presenters, I'm not talking about your home, being a performer at home. I'm talking about people when you're going beyond. So keep in mind whether it's your music minister that wants your gospel group to play, or whether you're talking about the local clubs that you perform in, or your friend's festival or something. The things we're going to be talking about is moving beyond those kind of local things, those familiar things. And so I'm not talking about, if you've got something that works, a good relationship with all of those other presenting spheres, don't feel like you have to mess with it. What I'm talking about is being able to take it to a wider audience. So as we continue discussing this idea of the parallel, the paradigms between the audience, the presenter, and the artist, everyone has something different that they want out of this. But the one universal is everybody wants a good show. Everybody wants to be able to entertain the audience. They want to, whatever it is. But what does it mean to have a good show? Depends upon who you are. If you're an audience member, you have a good time. You spend some quality time with family, with friends. It's entertaining. If you're a performer, I sold some merchandise. I had some fun doing it. I got some positive feedback for what it was that I was performing. But as a presenter, there are some other things that you have to consider. If I'm a presenter, am I thinking about the interpretation that's going on? Am I thinking about the money? Am I thinking about sponsors? All of those things have to be considered. So let's talk a little bit more about those things that the presenter has to balance. So the presenter is the person that's caught between all the different worlds. They're the facilitator. So they have to think about the audience. What is the audience? Who can I get to show up for this event? I have to worry about the artist, the talent. Can I make their minimum? Can I keep them booked? Can I can I keep things moving? Sponsors. I remember doing a festival and I'd booked this. It was environmental. I booked an environmental act, and one of our major funders was PCS. I won't say who it was. Now that I've always said it, but a major mining company, which is no longer around. And one of the acts just railed against one of our sponsors. Now, while I agreed with that person and everything that they were saying, it probably wasn't good business sense on mine probably to book that sponsor and that artist and couple them together. So I had to think about the overall balance. Venue. I've had the problem, two problems. I've booked in acts that I couldn't fill a space, and then I've booked in acts where I overfilled the space. And both of those are like equally horrible problems to have as a presenter. So you need to remember that that you have to think about what the presenters want, because if you don't at least consider what they're thinking about, you can have lots of problems arise. You can start thinking, well, they don't like me. Why don't they book me? Do they not like what I do? What's going on with that? And I've had this one artist that we booked to do a show, and then from that point forward, it was like almost every month they were asking me to book them again. And while that might work at local clubs where you get in a circuit, when you're doing festivals or when you're doing venues that book in acts from farther afield, they're not going to book the same artist over and over and over again usually. So don't take it personally when they don't work with you directly. Just try to be appreciative for what happens there. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the format of your show. And we'll talk a little bit about concerts and festivals, workshops, and school residencies. And all of these are what I would call product. Lots of times when musicians are thinking about product, they think about CDs that they can sell. But really, for millennia, professional musicians, people who have been supported by somebody else so that they can do their art, have had to do it as a service industry, not as a retail sales position. So concerts, we'll talk a little bit about some ways to work your concerts, but those are very different from festivals. Festivals might have a concert component in the evenings, but usually festivals you're going to get a 30-minute to a 45-minute set and then you're done. You're not going to be doing 2 sets in the evening like a concert would be. You'll be sharing the stage with people. We'll also be talking a little bit about workshops in a little more detail. It's a wonderful thing to add to your touring schedule, is have some workshops to work with. In fact, workshops can be perhaps one of the more lucrative aspects of a performing artist's toolkit. School residencies, I won't talk much about school residencies because I have some experience with it, but not a lot of experience. I worked as a folklorist in residence in Kentucky for a year, and worked bringing in artists as part of that. But a whole other set. Basically, you need to find out which one of these products you want and think what format suits your talents, what audiences want, what presenters might want, and then look where you can place your product. So let's talk a little bit more about workshops. Workshops is one of those terms that when you think about it, it seems like, oh yeah, you just take a workshop and you can show up and people do these hands-on activities. But sometimes it's nothing more than just an up-close concert where you talk about what it is that you do. You basically can talk about your special banjo technique, a cappella gospel singing. You can talk about different, this is a picture of Yuri Santos, Capoeira Angola master, who has taught workshops and done apprenticeships with Traditional Arts Indiana, and showing people actually how to do something. But I've also seen him where he does demonstration type workshops. So think about what level of workshop you might be able to have. So if you're doing a festival, adding workshops to your roster of services that you can apply, that you can supply, is a great way to make you more valuable to the festival. If you just want to say, oh, I just show up and perform, that's all I do, you have a lot less marketability to festivals. But if you can start having workshops, and I recommend not just saying, oh yeah, I can do a workshop, sit down, think about what that workshop would be. Make a list of those. I still do a handful of dulcimer festivals each year. And I have a whole list of workshops, about 10 or 12 different workshops that I can provide. Everything from just say no to capos or chords on the mountain dulcimer or whatever it is. And I have handouts, and I can provide those to the presenter, and those are made available at whatever the festival or event is. So think about that. What to expect from the presenter. You're building up all your skills, you're building up things that you're going to be able to provide to them. We'll talk a little bit about one sheets and electronic press kits and stuff that you're going to provide to these presenters. But just because someone will book you doesn't necessarily mean that you want to do it. You need to have a few more safeguards than you would if you were performing just at the local event. Probably if you're going to be performing a little further afield, you're going to have some more money out of hand in travel expenses, lodging, those sorts of things. So you need to know what you can expect from a presenter. I recommend at least a written letter of agreement or contract. That can be the form of an email. I've just heard horror stories about showing up to a festival and not getting paid. I've been there, done that. Took 4 days off work. Drove 2 states over, did the show, went to get paid, and all of a sudden I ended up getting paid, but I got paid a third of what I had actually negotiated for because they got squeezed on the money. If I had had a contract at that time, this was about 15 or maybe more years ago, if I had had a contract at that time, that probably could have pressed it a little bit more, but I didn't. So I'd expect at least a written letter. You want to make sure that the folks that you're working with are publicizing, getting the word out. It's great if you've got your own social media juice happening there and you can get people to show up to those events because they know who you are. But most of the time, it's the local events people who are going to be able to reach audiences who might be interested in what it is that you do. And the second, this happened to me here recently. I played a festival in Kentucky, and there was literally more performers than there was an audience because they'd had turnover in the staff. An event that years ago used to bring in 1,000 or more people, had like 20 people present at it. All of a sudden, what you expected doesn't make sense. You didn't sell the product, the CDs, the merchandise that you expected. You didn't get the additional gig booking from it that you'd hoped from people seeing you at an event. So it doesn't work out. The other thing is clean and adequate performance and dressing space. I have to be honest, I've been lots of places where that wasn't provided. But usually when you start performing out, you want to know whether they have backstage area, whether they have a green room, that sort of thing, and what's going to be provided. Be specific about your PA needs, your resources that you need there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Work out accommodations, meals, that sort of thing. Some places provide food, some places don't. You need to know when you're quoting a price for someone what the cost actually is. Time for sound check, whether you're going to get a a sound check or not. If you're doing a festival, you might not get a sound check. It might be you get on there and you perform. It might be that your band is not appropriate for an event that doesn't have a sound check. And that's something you have to negotiate. The other thing is prompt payment. You need to make sure you know what the payment agreement's going to be. I've, as a presenter who's worked with other presenting organizations, I took an artist to someone else's event, presented them that they were supposed to pay. They didn't process the payment, and the artist didn't have money to get home. And so that put me in a bad situation because the venue didn't do what they needed to do. The artist didn't do what he was supposed to do to make sure he was covered. And I think that I think that that's important to make sure everything dealing with money. Some people feel uncomfortable talking about it. It's much harder to talk about money when something goes wrong than to talk about it ahead of time when everything's going right. So get it out of the way early. I'm standing still. Sorry, are you getting a lot of mic noise? Is that what that is? I'm using a cheap. Oh, okay, I see. So you're getting lots of noise behind my ear. Yes, that works. The Secret Service. I was thinking more like a rose behind my ear, but anyway, is that better? I'm sorry. I don't hear what's going on, so I need you all to let me know when I'm being too noisy. Also, if you've got a question, feel free to type it into the chat and ask it, or I'll just keep going. So we talked about what you can expect from the presenter. Let's talk a little bit more closely about what the presenter expects from the performing artist. Showing up on time. I'm going to say that a second time. Showing up on time. There's nothing... For me, showing up on time is at least 30 minutes early. I mean, showing up on time is not walking up to the stage with your instrument at the time that you were going to perform. That's not acceptable. You need to get there early enough that if something goes wrong, somebody else is sick and they can't get there, you might need to go on stage a little bit earlier. Most musicians don't mind having a little extra stage time. That's been my experience. Get there on time, pay attention. Give them the product that you promised. And here I don't mean the CDs and stuff. I mean the services that you promised. If a presenter books a 5-piece bluegrass band, having a husband and wife fiddle and guitar duo show up is not acceptable. So I know that a lot of bands, when you're playing locally, you get away with the this band is not so bad, whatever. And it's 2 people on, if you book them here, it's 4 people here, and it changes. When you start booking beyond your local community, you need to make sure that the product is known and recognized, and they're getting that. Adequate publicity material. Press photos, bios, all the information, audio files if asked for, that they need to promote the show. The other thing is a technical writer and stage plot. Now those might be 2 terms that artists haven't really heard unless you've been performing out a little bit more. A technical writer is basically a written list of what your specific audio needs. If you need someone to provide a special type of guitar amp, you're going to be flying into a gig with your lap steel guitar, then you need this special Marshall amp that you want, or something designated, something specific. You need to tell them ahead of time, not wait until a day or so before. Oh yeah, you got an amp I could use. That's not good. So a technical writer is just, what specific needs do you have to technically do your job? And then a stage plot. I've looked at I started thinking about this. I probably looked at thousands of stage plots when I was a festival director, just because I had everyone turn them in. And there's going to be something just as simple as a hand sketch of what your performance blueprint looks like. What a stage plot is, and I'll go ahead and go to the next slide here. Well, actually, let me skip that one and I'll go to the stage plot. We'll talk about it now. Basically, it's a simple but specific diagram of your stage setting. I got a capital S there I don't need. And it's, you say, well, why do I need that? It's kind of a silly looking picture. This will often at a festival get put into a program booklet, and when the sound company flips to it, oh, who's going on stage next? Oh, it's the big fat guy and his guitar. Then you flip over. That was me, by the way. Then they can flip over. They look at the stage plot for big fat guy and the guitar, and they go and they set up the stage exactly as they need it. So you can draw that out with circles and squares, and make a nice stage plot that way. You can say, well, I can't draw. There's a nice, simple online free application. I'm big into free, called freestageplots.com. And basically, the graphic that I made before, I did with that. Basically, it's just drag and drop into this thing. The one thing that I noticed that they don't have that I really think they should have there are DI boxes, direct input boxes for people who are playing with pickups that they can plug directly into, because a lot of folks will run directly off a DI box, and I didn't see that offered there. But if you want to get your stands and your chairs and your mic set up and then draw in the DI box, this one here will work for you. Let me go back one more. So now that you're booked, let's talk just quickly about that. I'm taking longer than I wanted to. I'm sorry. Need to know the specifics of who, what, when, and where. There's nothing worse than map questing it out right before you go and you realize it's 5 hours farther than you thought and you're leaving late. You need to get the venue program details, what workshops you're doing, what performance times you're doing, whether you're doing one show, two shows at the event, you might say. Soon as you get there, you need to make contact with a production manager and stage manager and say, I'm here, I'm just checking in. If you've got a cell phone, tell them how they can reach you if they need to get you earlier. The other thing before you show up is final and load in and load out time. If you're touring with a band and you need to unload drums or you need to unload guitar cabinets or something like that, you'll have specific times for when you can do that. Now you might think, well, I'm finished at this gig at this time and then I can drive back, so I'll leave at 9 o'clock and the concert's not over until 11 o'clock because somebody's going on afterwards. You might not be able to get your stuff loaded out. And so make sure you know all of that stuff ahead of time, because there's nothing worse than people getting upset because they haven't planned ahead for what else might be going on there. So we'll go past the stage plots here. The other thing I mentioned, here's an ugly guy on a one sheet here. This is one I did for myself years ago because I didn't want to, I'm not performing anymore and I didn't want to single out any one person. Basically, a one sheet is useful when you're trying to get gigs. You can send those out to radio stations, to event promoters, that sort of thing. Basically, it includes a bio of the person, contact information, any quotes from other venues, people who have nice things to say about you besides your mom, tracks that people can listen to that you want them to listen to and hear what you sound like. Preferably some live tracks are always good to have there, and where people can find them. And you can host those on something like archive.org, the Internet Archive, or other online services like Libsyn or Blueberry or some of those places. but archive.org is a great place. You can host whole concerts if you wanted to, and people could download them and get an idea of what it is you do, or use something like YouTube. Also, list on the one sheet specific workshops that you're willing to that you want to offer, um, or any specials. I'm willing to lead the worship service on Sunday morning at this bluegrass festival, or I'm willing to be a square dance caller at the contra dance section of this festival, or I'm willing to, whatever it is that you're willing to do for area events. Those are good to include in that. Well, one sheets are still very usable today for material reasons, easy for people to track. But in the digital world, there's another version of that that's coming in. And the best one I've seen out there is an electronic press kit tool called Reverb Nation. And probably some of you have heard of that. This is a page for the White Lightning Boys, a kind of bluegrass band from my home area, Brown County, Indiana. And they've got a short bio there. They've got contact information. They've got show video that they've uploaded there. They've got tracks that you can listen to excerpts of. They've got press photos there. Everything that a booking agent or a promoter, after you've been booked, can go to this place and get it. One of the things I've also learned about some performers are good about sending the press needs to the event, to the book, to the presenter. Some folks aren't as good. This is a way that you can actually get stuff to people ahead of time. So there's that. Some other ones besides Reverb Nation is SoundCloud and Bandcamp. We had a workshop about 3 months ago or so, I guess, with Joe O'Connell on Bandcamp. So I encourage you to go to our website and you can listen to that workshop as well. And that also could be used in a less effective way, I think, than Reverb Nation can for doing digital press kits, or e-press kits as they're called. Before I go on into the next section of my presentation, which I'll make go a lot faster, I want to see if there are any questions, comments, anything people want to say about this. I'll try to not make things as staticky. If Chad can let me know if I'm heard okay or not. So let me know. You can enter the chat right there if you've got questions, and I can repeat those once you get there. I'm not seeing anyone typing yet. Lynn Williamson asks a good question. Should performers send CDs, DVDs as support materials? If they're asked for, definitely. I think in this digital age, I think sending an electronic press kit is preferred. Some bookers still like what I call folk booty, the physical stuff. They like to get CDs. They like to get some of that stuff, but that costs the artist money. Have them be willing to send them upon request. But I think the days of sending out CDs and DVDs and press kits is quickly setting. I think some people still do it, but I think it's less effective today. One thing you might do that this also made me think of is if you do have a lot of product and you're flying into a gig, it costs so much to take extra baggage these days. Ship your stuff ahead of time. Most venues are perfectly happy to take product. That is festivals and those sorts of places. Give yourself plenty of time to track them down, though, because you can't expect them to. Got another question here. Sarah Hayes asks, what's the best way to get gigs booked? Send out the press kit and wait for a response, or follow up in a timely manner after the submission of press kits? And this is always variable. I would send press kits. I would also do a follow-up call.
but honestly, it's usually booked after someone has seen you perform, that there's some type of personal connection, and I think having a strong online presence goes a lot farther than hounding a presenter, hounding a booking agent for this. Send them the electronic press kit. Send them follow-up letters, maybe or emails, maybe a couple, 3 times, with enough time in between. Um, but more importantly is if you build up a strong Facebook following or Twitter following or social media website following, if you have a whole tribe around you, then you don't have to worry about you still should be booking those people. You should still be trying to get them to agree to it and sending them follow-up material. But having your fan base actually asking the venue, oh, this person, they sent you a press kit. Can you, we'd love to have them. It'd be really great if you could book so-and-so for this event. We'd really like to have them at that. Or we want to see them. It's much better having, send the press kits, do the requisite follow-up emails, phone calls. The squeaky wheel does get greased usually. But let your fans also carry some of that weight. Everyone's got folks say on your Facebook, say, send in my press kit to this festival. I hope I get booked. If you have any connections, let me know. That's totally allowed. Let people, let your audience, let your fan base be part of your booking process for you. That is the way things have changed today. It used to be, good old boy system. People got booked because they knew somebody, or they did a showcase and they were seen, and there was a buzz created at that. Now a lot of this happens online, and you build a community there, and you can book it from that. Any other questions that are out there? Did I answer both of those well enough? Lynn's typing, and so Sarah Hayes. Sometimes I can get things in my mind and not actually answer the question correctly. Okay, great. And I'll continue to answer questions as they come up. Do you think it's important to have a Facebook page? Sarah asks. I'm undecided on one. As far as Facebook goes, yes. So if you're looking to be a performer out in the world, you have to have a Facebook page. Let me say this. You need to have a web page first. A lot of people want to build their fan base just around Facebook. You can link your Facebook with your website and make them work together that way. There's a thing called Hootsuite. It's free. You can link your web page and your Twitter and your Facebook together. But I say that because there's been a lot of changes for performing artists with Facebook in recent years, and we never know when that's going to change again. And it's just like building your house on somebody else's property. As long as it's on somebody else's property, you don't have control over it. So 2 things. Yes, you need to be at Facebook, but don't make that the only place you are. As far as social media goes, you need to be in both places. Okay? I'm going to keep moving. Like I said, feel free to type into the chat room, and we'll continue to follow up with those, and I'll make deputize Chad into breaking in, because this last part is more in the head type of stuff. Thanks, Thomas. I didn't even know you were there, but I'm glad you're there. Have a good afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit. I worked with the Park Service for several years, and there's a great man by the name of Freeman Tilden who basically championed the whole idea of the interpreter's art. He wrote a book called Interpreting Our Heritage, which for the National Park Service was a real important work, and continues to be an important tool for interpreters out there. And he came up with 5 principles I wanted to talk to, and I think as performers, we'll quickly go through these. I think as performers, you can take those and start building or augmenting your performances, and think about things and moving it out of your comfort zone just a little bit. And so his principle number one is your performance must relate to the audience. Your job as an interpreter is to link your art to the lives of each audience member. Basically what that's saying, and this is my job as a folklorist, is to try, no matter how much we put different people from different communities, different ethnic communities, religious communities, different racial communities, whatever we want to break things down in, unless we are able to connect with people on a one-to-one relationship, that someone has something that they can identify with, it's not interpretation. You have to be able to connect, whether it's gospel music that you're performing, or whether it's music from home, whether it's bluegrass, whether it's punk rock. If you're not connecting with whatever it is with that audience that you're trying to reach in their lives, you're not reaching them. Otherwise, they're just hearing sound. I get into whole types of gripes about pop music and just background music of that. Lots of times for folklorists, we talk about the familiar and the unfamiliar things. We often end up working with communities that aren't presented many mainstream events and festivals. But I think it's important to remember that when you perform, you're presenting, no matter what it is you perform, when you perform outside your local community, you're kind of presenting yourself, your local life, your everyday life, to larger groups of people. And you might be more things that you have to explain. Otherwise, it just becomes the exotic other. If people can't understand what a certain type of dance is or a certain type of music is used for, and relate it back to their life, it's just going to be exotic something else out there. Oh, that was interesting. Or, oh, that was pretty music. And as a folklorist, we want to move beyond ideas of interesting and pretty and get into some real cross-cultural understanding. And so you need to be able to explain or contextualize what it is that you're doing. Sometimes people think they know something, and but they aren't really. You want to give them another twist of it all. I'm moving my mic wire. I'm sorry. A couple of years ago, I took the Not Too Bad Bluegrass Band, NTB3 as they like to be called, to Washington, D.C. to perform at the Kennedy Center and at the Library of Congress. And this was bluegrass. And one of the uphill things is we were asked to take a traditional music group from Indiana to D.C. And I wanted to make sure that we took something that represented our state or a community within our state. And bluegrass is important to Indiana, partially because Bill Monroe founded the Bluegrass Festival in Bean Blossom, Indiana. But also, bluegrass really had its roots formed from folks moving up from Appalachia up into the industrial belt in the Chicagoland area of northern Indiana to work in the steel mills and the factories. That's where bluegrass music came from. Much like the Serbian tamburitsa music and Greek bouzouki bands and stuff that happened at the same time in the 1930s and 40s, bluegrass was related to that. And so one of the things I tried to do with presenting the Not Too Bad Bluegrass Band in D.C. was to make it not just about, oh, that was neat toe stomping music. It was actually moving it into, this is an Indiana musical tradition. This is why it's significant. This is what you think you know about bluegrass. Let's look at it a little bit differently. But you have to do it in a non-teaching way, or non-invasive way. The second principle relates to just what I was saying. Information is not interpretation. Just because you tell people about something, my slide's not wanting to cooperate there. Just because you tell them a bunch of information doesn't mean that you're interpreting it. You want to make sure that when you're performing, you're not just augmenting between your songs information, but you're actually engaging with people. You're trying to make it interesting, inspiring, provocative. You're trying to make a connection with people, not just tell them something. And I see this a lot with bands that don't have a normal leader in the band, where kind of everybody's in charge. That often there's no flow in the band, and the band doesn't end up really leading people through the show. They just say, "Oh, here's a old Red Foley song that we learned such and such and such and such." That's just information. That's not leading them through a program or through a show. So think about it from an interpretive point of view. That's what, especially performing at a folklife festival or a folk festival, is important for you to know. Let's talk about principle number 3. A performance is an art made up of several art forms, and all arts are learnable. I kind of mentioned this at the very beginning. I can't give artistic ability to a certain degree to people. My thing's not behind my ear again. I can't give artistic ability, but you can learn certain talents. You can develop these things. Often you can read a funny story or read a letter from home, tell stories, sing a lullaby, something that might not even be part of your normal performance routine, your performance show that you do, what you've been booked to do, but there's some little augment that you add to it that actually lets people understand where it is you're from a little bit more, understand who you are a little bit more. I've done almost all these things. I tell lots of stories. I always joke that I'm a storyteller that plays lots of different instruments just so people listen to my stories. But I've used to read from the sheriff's log from Brown County, Indiana, where I'm from, and there'd be all types of funny things. Thursday night, funny lights out over the barn. Farmer thinks UFO is impregnating cattle. Send squad car instantly. Those sorts of things that people will laugh, they find it funny, but they also understand a little bit more about where you're from and the type of community. They know that Brown County then is rural. They know that we don't take ourselves too seriously. Principle number 4. Your chief aim for your performance should be to provoke or inspire your audience to, and that's up to you. What do you want it to do? If you're a gospel group, you might have a very spiritual mission in what it is that you're doing. If you're doing occupational work songs, you may have a very political mission in what it is that you're doing. You may, if you're performing an ethnic traditional music, you may have a very cultural perspective, a mission that you're going to do. But think about not just performing, but think about what it is you want your performance to do besides sell CDs, tapes, DVDs, whatever. What is the goal of your performance? I always liked this quote from Woody Guthrie. He said, "My job is to disturb the comfortable and to comfort the disturbed." I can get behind a mission statement like that. Number 5. Freeman Tilden's principle is a performance should be holistic. Your show should reach your audience in many ways. Think about the visual appearance of your show, the music the stories that you're telling, the emotion that's coming across. Appeal to the whole man, you might say. Folklorists, we would call that. You sing a song, that's a text. The texture is how you do it. But the one thing that folklorists often focus on is the context, the situation that it is, and how do you do this? We can often talk about natural context. It's people performing music in worship, dance as part of a community celebration, stories that are told in a barber shop. But Kenneth Goldstein had this thing he called induced natural context that field workers would try to do, where they get people to perform things. And often if you're doing a festival, especially a folklife festival, or you're doing a performance, you might want to do that. And you could have stage props. I remember working with Homer Ledford and then
bring his workbench out and he'd have sawdust around in the area he was doing a demonstration. Got a picture here of the Fairfield Four from one of their album covers. They didn't wear costumes, what I liked about it. They just had these clothes that referenced a certain identity to them. They weren't pretending to be something that they weren't, but they were cluing you in. They were sending a message through their clothing of who they were. Even something simple as pre-concert music can set the tone for what it's going to be. I'm going to finish up right there again, and we can move on to questions. I want to make sure we spend the last few minutes doing that. I want to thank everyone for joining us, but what questions do you have? I kind of ran through that interpretive part quite a bit, but I'm here. We've got a few more minutes before the time is up, but I'll stay on as long as you all want. So what are your questions? Anybody got any questions? I'm not seeing anybody typing, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everyone. Thank Chad again for doing this.
You might mention this.
Ah,
Two pair with Facebook.
right. Chad brought up a great point for Sarah, who brought up, I was talking about website and Facebook. That doesn't have to be from scratch. There's WordPress that's out there. There's Blogger that's out there. You could use Bandcamp or Reverb Nation, but those are also the latter two are building on somebody else's space, and you never know when they're going to go away. But something like WordPress is a place that I would really, or Blogger, very reputable companies will be around for a very, very long time. I would do that. So it doesn't have to be hard. In fact, I showed an artist last week how to set up a website in 5 minutes with a post, a photograph, everything from start to finish in 5 minutes. Okay. Pat's is asking something. Could you see what that was? From a performer's point of view, I don't get what that's saying. Oh, thank you, Pat. Thank you very much for coming and being part of it. I hope it was useful for people. We have a local question here.
With all of the tools and websites that are out there, do you have any tips on how people should distinguish themselves from all of the other stuff that's on the internet in order to make the...
Okay. The question was, how do you make yourself appealing to a gig when there's all this stuff out there online? I mean, you can go to YouTube or something like that, and you can find 100 people who do what it is that you do. And you can, it's hard to cut through the clutter. I think that's the question that's being asked. I think it comes from knowing an audience, picking a niche. If you're just going out and booking, I'm going to go out and do festivals this year, and you're looking at festivals, that's really wide. You start thinking about, okay, I'm going to do bluegrass festivals. Okay, where do bluegrass festival people go? I start looking at that. Okay, of those bluegrass people, who are the people who are going to be into what I do? I'm a banjo player, or I do clawhammer, so I need bluegrass festivals that also have a clawhammer old-time component to it, like a Mark Johnson clawgrass type of thing. You start narrowing down that niche, and then you find out where those people are, and I think then you can start building your audience around that more focused niche. You provide people with free stuff, whether it's workshops, free tracks, blog posts talking about how it is you do what you do. It's all about building that tribe around you. And then people are going to be wanting to book you to do shows. What used to happen with performing at a venue, you'd go into a showcase, or one booker knows another booker and they recommend you. That still happens. But more and more it's the audience that's driving. We're going to book them because we know that we can get a lot of people that'll turn out to hear this person because they've got so many people in this community that want to hear them. Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
thank you.
Okay.
Two more online, one
Lynn?
for part two.
About part two from I'm looking from Lynn. Okay, I had to scroll down. Sorry about that. I'm wondering if there could be a part two of this, and would be details about approaching presenters, some resources for this top folk festivals, how to apply them, global fest, just finishing in New York City. Some details like that from your experience. I think that would be really great. There's some really, what would be really cool is to pull together folklorists who work in this and do like a round table via our webinar format, and maybe bring in more than one person talking and sharing that. Because I know that from the Smithsonian to the National Folk Festival to state festivals like up in Michigan, like in Florida that I used to direct, like down in Kentucky, Western Folklife. There are just lots and lots of wonderful events out there, and finding out what they're looking for and really doing a part two would be really great. So yes, I would love to do that. We'll get working on that. And, Lynn's typing another question.
Sarah had a comment about
YouTube. What was the comment about YouTube, Chad? Just, I'm not seeing it here.
Sarah says, I looked up how to get more
Yep. Yeah, YouTube, having it all linked in with your Facebook, Twitter, posting on YouTube. I think YouTube is probably the most, it's used a lot, and I still think it's probably the most underused thing for traditional and folk acts on being able to reach larger audiences. Because you then post to YouTube, that's only the beginning point. Then you embed it in your website, you share it on your Facebook, you start giving it out to people who are interested and are hanging out in places where you are. It's easy to build up a fan base when you start giving that type of stuff away. And it's also easier for people to find you. YouTube is a great place. Anything I want to learn, I go to YouTube. From using a program to, when I started thinking about this type of presentation, I checked out what was going on YouTube, what people were asking. Finding someone to put together a tour for artists, and I think that would be a really good workshop. Lynn's asking about doing a workshop on that. I think that would be a really important one. That takes things to the next level. I'll be honest, that's one area I've not had a lot of experience with. I did a lot of touring, but it was all a week at a time, not actually staying on the road, booking in 4 or 5 things. Maybe I'll get my friend Brian Bowers to do that. He's the workhorse performer out there. But that would be a great workshop as well. You remember all these. Okay, it's we're about out of time. I want to thank everyone. We've had just a really good turnout for this, and sounding to me like we need to do more on some of these technical things, how to book shows, how to develop a tour, how to work with folk festivals. Maybe we can even partner with a folk festival again to do that and just kind of work with some people. That would be a great thing. So I want to thank everyone. Thank Chad again. Thank the local folks here, Betsy and Josephine, and also want to thank everyone that's in the chat room. I'm around for a little bit longer. I'm going to let people go as they want to, but if you want to ask some more questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I don't do a lot of work in this arena now, so but I'm always willing to help. Lynn's asking if this will be accessible later. Yes, it will be available online. We'll have it on our website. I'll probably also upload it to YouTube. And I encourage you all, share the links to this with other people if you think that it's valuable. Let other people have access to it. One of the reasons I posted to Publor and other places is while I'm doing this for the state of Indiana, I think the stuff we're talking about anybody could learn from, and it looks like we have some people from further afield that's actually in the chat room. So that's great. Thank you. Well, we're going to turn off the recording. Anybody got any more questions? I'm here to answer, but I'll wait for you all. We're going to end the workshop now. Thank you, Chad.